Demon the Fallen was released in 2002, barely 2 years before the original World of Darkness setting was ended by White Wolf to be replaced by the upcoming New World of Darkness, later renamed Chronicles of Darkness. It was a short-lived product that still managed to get out about 11 books during its production cycle, and at times you had to wonder how much was actually sacrificed in order to cram out as much as possible of this new splat before the setting was finished. In my opinion, the end result was a rushed product in more than one way. There's a lot of half-baked ideas lining the book, and the depth of the lore presented is often rather shallow or unexplored entirely, and the balancing especially is an issue. A lot of the powers found in Demon the Fallen have been rather meticulously analyzed by others, and the result is almost unanimously, it's broken. Demon the Fallen's spiritual successor, Demon the Descent, is generally considered a superior product, as it both got rid of the overtly Judeo-Christian motifs and also made each angel created somewhat more unique. There was also a conflict with the angels involved, or so I've heard, and that's one of the things sorely lacking in Demon the Fallen. It's also the 9th splat release for Chronicles of Darkness, without a deadline I presume, so at that point I would imagine a lot of the kinks have been ironed out and the ideas better handled. I kind of have a hate-love relationship with this game now. It is one that I remembered quite fondly from when it first came out, both because I've always had a fascination with the concept of evil embodied, as well as the idea of fallen angels. The Exorcist is one of my favorite films, and I've always enjoyed ghost stories. So when the possibility came to play as demons inhabiting the bodies of mortals left on a planet devoid of overwatch from God, it appealed to me. But looking at the setting now, a lot of the criticism I've read about it really resonates with me. I'm not overtly bothered by the kind of haphazardous borrowing from Judeo-Christian theology in this book, as much as I'm frustrated over the inconsistencies and the honestly sloppy job. You got the classic demons of Baal and Asmodeus, I hope I got the name right this time, next to Japanese deities like Hoso no Kami, who apparently is also a demon. Asia, Africa, and America are barely mentioned in these books, but the authors waste no time in letting us know that practically any deity worshipped is an earthbound in disguise. Like literally every god in history. I omitted outright claims like this from my video because I felt it was kind of crass. The book sort of hand-waves away any kind of faith to be misguided and connected with fallen angels. Except of course for the Abrahamic, who somehow are the only people in the world who got it right, except they did it for the wrong reasons because it was all Lucifer planning it to steal power from the earthbound. I can only fathom why whoever was in charge of that felt it was necessary to mention the Aztec, the Incans, and the Mayan religions being all basically formed around blood sacrifice to Azrael. That's their only purpose. And that's the only mention you'll ever get of them as far as I know, and it does the culture a huge disservice and may as well have been excluded. It really doesn't contribute to anything. I'm not going to dwell too much on the Earthbound book in this review because it is by far the absolute worst of all the content produced for the series, and a real low watermark for all of White Wolf in general. It tries to sum up humanity's history and its relationship with the Earthbound demons, but comes across as being written in an afternoon by someone who took some classes in history once, but didn't remember most of it. A lot of it is glossed over, and it really doesn't hold up to the usual standard I'd expect from such a section in, say, Vampire the Masquerade, and this is with several years of experience of writing such things behind them. I realize I may come across as not liking Demon the Fallen here, and please don't get me wrong. I'm still stoked by this setting, and I honestly felt myself inspired so many times writing the scripts for my videos. I would love to include Earthbound cults in my games, or have players acting as fallen angels given a second chance to reclaim their divinity in a world devoid of faith. I genuinely think that I would have a good time running a game of Demon the Fallen, and I think that conceptually the different kinds of demons, their domains of power, and their factions provide some really interesting dynamics. What I struggle with is the explicitness of these books. It utterly lacks any of the mystery that previous editions have had. Vampire's history is almost religious in its obscurity. Werewolf feels like a highly polished retelling of a story spoon-fed to young Garou to ease their transition into eco-terrorism, and Mage is all about living in the shadows of much greater times. But Demon literally starts with the creation of the universe by God, and gives you the whole story of how God created the world and humanity, how humanity was tempted to fall by demons, and how demons and angels then waged war. It leaves very little room for any kind of doubt, or for the players to fill in the blanks, or for improvisation. It also demands more of a new player than I think most of the other settings would. A new player could always sort of ride along with the story with the excuse of being a new vampire or werewolf or mage, but in Demon you're an ancient soul possessing a human being. You've been around since everything was created. I mean, there's of course a system in place to help you out with this, the legacy background, which is supposed to represent how much of your previous existence you remember. But it's kind of a clunky way of tackling this, in my opinion. I would have much more preferred if the reason for the demon's exile into the abyss was left more vague, and that the demon archdukes of Lucifer weren't so utterly evil. At least Azrael, Asmodeus, and Abaddon were showing signs of being assholes, less than a few hours after helping humanity out for the first time, but both Belial and Dagon were given little reason to become so utterly evil, as these characters were explored very little, despite having an entire book dedicated to them. Which is a big problem I'd like to stop at for a while. Despite reading so much about these 5 demon lords, I really don't feel like I understand them much to begin with. Azrael is obnoxiously vaguely described. Dagon is given almost no characterization except that he's loyal to Lucifer and kind of like a one-track mind. And Belial, after the initial debate, does close to nothing before he becomes banished to the abyss. If White Wolf knew they had limited amount of books to print for this setting, there's an awful lot of faffing about in the one book that should give you more insight into this to begin with. The actual time before their imprisonment is barely given a couple of pages, doing very little to establish the motivations of these fallen archdukes and what drove them to such acts of depravity. It's like there was an on switch for angels to suddenly become evil, and it really doesn't work for me. The factions of demons the fallen are also one of the things I struggle with when I think of the new Chronicles of Darkness. While conceptually they do stand out from each other and all have really interesting core perspectives on humanity and their own damnation, I feel like they often work much, much better as SPCs than something for the PCs to choose. Depending on their choices, some player characters will literally hate each other based on this choice alone, and I see a lot of problems trying to bring a group of powerful demons together when they have fundamentally different views on what to do about humanity. Demon, like a few of the other splats, offers very little reasoning for why player characters ever ought to work together, unless they happen to be in the same faction, or at the same place and are dealing with a collective problem. In a lot of the previous titles, pacts, coteries, cabals, and what have you are all either deeply culturally connected to their respective supernaturals, or it is vital for their survival of the individual members of the group, at least at an early stage. In Demon, I'd only ever see a group of demons work together if their greater scheme depended on it. They're fighting over faith, after all. And this is not a flaw exclusive to Demon the Fallen, but something I think most of the systems who involve factions have to deal with. I'd still assume that if the players are in on it, it might provide a lot of fodder for really good role-playing, but here it definitely seems to provide even less incentive for certain demons to work together, a problem they address in the player's guide quite thoroughly, though I noticed. Incidentally, the player's guide is a must for anyone who wants to play Demon, because in between the lore and the massive list of lores, that is to say demonic powers, there's not a lot of room for much else in the core rulebook. There's a lot more discussion on the legacy background, and more thorough discussion about what your demonic self was up to before and during your imprisonment. It is also one of the better made books in the collection. I do however think that the Earthbound and their servants, mortal or otherwise, provide a really good foil for the demons. I would have much more enjoyed seeing angels thrown into the mix as well, however, simply because it would provide a really good dichotomy between good and evil. To further push the ideas of this game, they might even be able to offer something akin to apotheosis to the fallen, allowing them to return to the creator and become one with them in complete absolution of all their sins. I mean, they'd die, but they would die knowing that they were actually forgiven for what they'd done. It would contrast the highly materialistic and short-sighted, selfish embodiments of the Earthbound. That being said, Demon the Fallen, in my opinion, doesn't seem to offer a lot of variety in terms of longevity and more sandboxy games. Unless of course you enjoy playing a game revolving around constructing cults, finding worshippers, undermining other demons, and potentially subjugating other supernaturals around you. The world of Demon simply isn't that well developed and doesn't offer a lot on its own. You'd have to get pretty creative as a storyteller to keep the game running. There's only one setting book provided for this game, which is City of Angels, taking place in Los Angeles, a really good choice, complete with its chronicle book, Fear to Tread. It revolves around Lucifer revealing his existence and kickstarting the final battle, which of course means there's not an awful lot of sitting around or amassing power happening in it. It's kind of hard for me to come out for or against this game. I think I definitely like Demon as more of a supplement than a system on its own. If I'm using demons, Earthbound or not, in a game of mine, I will happily steal from these books. I have a real-life group I play with occasionally, and I think Demon might really work with this group, but I would say you'd really need to be able to improvise a lot, and work with what you have a lot. It really doesn't offer you a lot of story seeds. Because like I mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of incentive in the game for the group to stick together unless they feel inclined to do so themselves. It's also painfully dated in terms of writing, and while I'm not really much of a prude, I still found the level of maturity in these books kind of off-putting. A lot of times it boils down to superficial sex and gore, and it gets a little tiring and heavy-handed. There are some real diamonds, of course, but there's a lot of rough you need to sift through to find them. If I were to rewrite Demon the Fallen, I would definitely put much less emphasis on the origin of these beings. Just get rid of the whole part before their imprisonment in the Abyss, and maybe even have demons be just one of the many names they're referred to. We have stories of evil spirits all around the world. It's really not that difficult. Malicious entities locked away for an eternity for some crime they may or may not have committed. Memory is a fickle thing after all. And now they are free and bound to flesh and forced to having to deal with the duality of their new natures. I would put a lot more emphasis on the mystery of it, on personal relationships, and the construction of networks of faithful that these beings gain power from, but that they also need to protect and help. In a sense, I guess you could imagine you're playing neighborhood deities who have been given a second chance to do some good in the world, if they feel like it. I mean, they could also do some evil in the world and just give their followers power. That could also work. As for what happens to one of these deities if their host body dies, or if they lose all this faith, that is something I would leave equally vague and mysterious. Faith and relationships should definitely be core themes of this game. I don't have much of a problem with the houses, they're easily translated into something more abstract, but the factions I would probably change into groups more trying to explain their own natures in different ways, and trying to find evidence to support this. In a sense more focused on philosophy and outlook on their lives, rather than having clear goals that are in contention with the others. Perhaps some of them are trying to figure out what their true purpose is, and may even try to attain some next level of enlightenment or even the aforementioned apotheosis, while others instead may be more focused on the here and now, helping or subduing their followers. Because obviously, earning faith through fear should still be an option. I had a lot of fun researching this game, and since these books are usually available pretty cheaply on DriveThruRPG as PDFs, there's really no harm in getting them. But among White Wolf's many works, these have definitely not aged well. Expect a lot of edginess about religion, casual and frequent remarks about rape, which is always explicitly brought up as a specific horror done by evil people simply for the sake of highlighting how evil they are, and some honestly baffling design decisions when it comes to other cultures and creeds. There's no shame in liking Demon, and I still do, but I also understand how unlikely it is that we will ever see a 20th anniversary edition of it. It would require some serious rewrites and changes to the lore, and I don't know if Onyx Path or World of Darkness are willing to go through those lanes. Finally, thank you all for watching, and stay safe out there, for Gehenna will soon be upon us. The three grandchildren of Cain wait patiently for the time of judgment to arise. Bambi Parsons, a leader with an unbreakable will, Procyon, who has been reborn as a god amongst Cain's angels, and Dugal, whose thirst for blood is matched only by his strength of will and purpose. Their children, the Methuselah, control our every move through their timeless jihad. They are Her Satanic Majesty Danny, whose mere presence chills the heart, Maximilian S. Hardcastle, a tutor and master of the jihad, Socrates Johnson, a masterful craftsman of stories, Lauren Eason, a trustworthy ally and friend, Alexander Kushtaria, esoteric scholar and mentor in magecraft, and Snow, who oversees the progress of the council patiently from the shadows. On the council of the Primogen are seated Edward Reed, Ian Nichols, the Black Friar, Raven Fang, Brandon Hunter Hayden, the Autumn Alchemist, and Michelle Light, wise leaders and of good judgment. This week, the council would wish to thank the elder Dylan William Hanney for your continued support. We deeply appreciate your wisdom and belief in our endeavors. We would also wish to give our regards to the ancillary Evelyn, whose service to the council has not gone unnoticed. Thank you, Evelyn, for your support. Naturally, all our elders, ancillae, and neonates receive our gratitude from the bottoms of our heart. Without your support, this would not be possible. And thank you for watching. And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and Hell followed with him.